Welcome, everybody. Can everyone at the back hear us okay? Great. Well, thank you very much for attending our session today on Beyond Buzzwords, Building Resiliency and Reliability and Sustainability in Medtech Supply Chains. We know you have a choice of events today, so we appreciate you flying with us. We'll try to make sure that we land safely and on time as we get going. I think we're going to start with a video to just set the context and set the stage today.
Medtech supply chains today are global and complex. Countless numbers of medical devices and equipment are manufactured and moved from one end of the world to the other. The pandemic challenged the resilience of these globally interdependent supply chains, exposing just how fragile they are. And several other factors continue to challenge supply chains: geopolitical turmoil, trade dynamics, extreme weather events, and economic stresses on labor and supply. Over the past 2 years, supply chain resilience has been a top priority for CEOs and investors. But there's a risk that the topic of the quarter will crowd out supply chains as a focus. A recent assessment highlights that most executives give themselves low grades for resilience. This finding was even more pronounced for medtech companies, who said they are less proactive and more reactive than they should be. This more reactive posture has important implications. Proactive companies perform 3 times better than reactive ones. So we are left asking, how can medtech companies build in more supply chain resilience?
How indeed. Maybe to get started, introductions. My name is Bob Lavoie. I'm a senior partner and managing director with BCG. I'll be your moderator today. I've been advising clients in the medtech space since Y2K, and that will come back. And I think another way to say that is, Nacho, I think I'm in the perfect demographic for one of your key products. For those who don't know the Olympus portfolio, you will. Maybe to get started, we'll start maybe down at the end. Vlad, we can work our way back here with introductions.
Yeah, Vlad Makatsaria. I lead the surgical business for Johnson & Johnson called Ethicon. And I've been almost 30 years within industry. In the US, before that in Asia, before that in Europe, Middle East, Africa, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you. Looking forward to this discussion.
Hi, good morning. I'm very happy to be here with you today. My name is Tammy Beckham, and I'm the Associate Director for the Resilient Supply Chain Program at CDRH. Just very thrilled to be here. Just a little bit of background before I started at CDRH. I was also over in HHS when the public health emergency happened, and ran the testing and diagnostic working group out of HHS as well. So a little bit of experience during the public health emergency on supply chain, and my background is really infectious disease. So it's really great to be here with you, and I look forward to this conversation today.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Nacho Avia. I'm the Chief of Strategy Officer of Olympus Corporation. I've been in the company for very long, so probably I might need a colonoscopy too, as well. And as you know, Olympus is the market leader in endoscopy products, and we play in many other disciplines. And before my current job, I've been in many other places and regions working in the company. So this topic of supply chain definitely is a very hot topic today, more than ever, and I'm happy to the exciting discussion we have ahead. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm Manisha Shabugai. I'm CEO of Active Surgical. We are a startup organization. We have an advanced visualization platform that works in the operating room and allows surgeons to see real-time blood perfusion. So as a startup, I'm excited to be here and provide sort of that perspective with regards to supply chain issues. We are in a limited market release of our technology, so we are FDA cleared, and we're about to scale up for full commercialization. So this topic of supply chain is really interesting for us. And prior to being with Active, I was with Olympus Corporation for quite some time, so I had the pleasure of working alongside some of my fellow panelists. So thanks for being here.
Yep. And good morning, everyone. My name is Randy Clark. I'm the president of Flex Health Solutions business. Have spent about 25 years in medtech, 23 of those with various OEMs, and most recently leading Flex as one of the world's largest contract manufacturers.
Great. It's my pleasure, a great privilege to be sharing the stage with you guys. Really appreciate it. Randy, I'm going to come to you first. We just saw in the video there's a lot has happened even since COVID. I mean, COVID was the high watermark for supply chain challenges in the last sort of couple of years, but even since then, we've seen quite a bit of disruption, geopolitical tensions, trade dynamics that probably make it a little bit less easy, if you will, around that. Some supply shortages, continued inflation. So I'm going to love to get your view and your vantage point, given that you're working across a cross-section of different OEM clients in the medtech space. Before you answer, I also want to poll our audience here as well. If you just look up at the screen, if you can grab your phones, point it at that QR code, that'll give you a series of options to choose. We'd love to know from you what the top 3 supply chain related challenges your organization is currently addressing. We'll come back to the answer to that once we're done with the panel discussion here. So Randy, why don't you kick us off?
Sure, I'll kick it off while everyone is putting in their entries. And I would think you're right, Flex has an opportunity to work with many different medical companies of all sizes. I think if I break it down, I would almost put it into about 3 segments. First, everyone had to react to the situation without question. Everyone had to lean in to react to everything that was going on real time. But then you see, or I saw, some companies started to evolve, right? Really evolve their ways of working, evolve their operating models, and just how they were attacking this. And then lastly, some companies truly transformed during this period of time. So to break it down, when I'm saying everyone was reacting to the critical components that they needed as part of their BOM, without question. You were throwing everything that you had at it. You were trying to buy as much as you could direct. You were trying to buy what you could from a broker market, and that just skyrocketed inventories to some of the highest levels that we've seen. It took a while for those to start to burn down because you were still gated by what we call that golden screw, right? That final component, which is going to allow everything to kind of flow through to get square sets out the door. So we're at a better state today with critical shortages across the industry at an all-time low, but I could say customers all reacted to this differently during that period of time. The best companies that were almost 1 or 2 steps ahead had just outstanding analytics, very, very strong analytics. They had really strong supplier relationships. They weren't trying to develop these during the crisis. They had them going into the crisis. And then some people, just from an economies of scale perspective, just had that kind of luxury where they could work with suppliers just due to that. But I would say what separated everyone going through that versus companies that were truly transforming is just 2 things that I want to hit on. One would be putting money into a proactive kind of design refresh, right? So companies that even a year ago or 2 years ago put something in to just update old legacy boards. If you see where they are today, they're in a much better position. In getting supply of those components, but then from an ongoing cost and ongoing risk mitigation perspective. So if you have a legacy board, yes, you're out getting some of that supply, but the but is you're still kind of hand to mouth, and those costs aren't going to come down as you normally would expect cost reductions to start to normalize on those legacy components. Last point to circle back around from where I see transformation, our companies that truly try to transform, is with regionalization. So from that perspective, I'm not trying to say globalization, regionalization, one's better than the other, because it needs to be dependent on your company's strategy. But the companies that did pivot into regionalization are definitely ahead in executing that strategy. They have a clear China for China strategy. They have a footprint either in Europe or low-cost countries in Eastern Europe. And then we're seeing a lot of demand, especially in the Americas, Mexico in particular, and people now trying to develop those supply chains. So that's kind of where I see kind of some of the best in class and the transformation I've really seen within a lot of the top 20s and mid-cap companies.
Great. Nacho, Vlad, I think you guys probably had an interesting perspective given that you were selling into hospitals at the last couple of years where they've been challenged in their own supply chains. They were basically the front line of not just through COVID, but coming out of COVID, dealing with increased procedure volumes, everything else. How did your companies respond? What were you seeing with some of your customers in terms of managing your own supply chains downstream?
Well, thank you, Bob, and thank you, Randy, for your introduction. You mentioned a lot of things that all of them will give a lot of conversational points for this panel. But what I would say is that we all learned a lot during COVID about our supply chain. And painfully, we learned about the weaknesses of our supply chain during the COVID times. I think for a number of years, we were enjoying, I would say, a situation where sourcing was not a problem, logistics systems were working, and globalization was helping us. Then suddenly COVID hit, and then is when we realized that our business continuity plans, our contingency plans, our sourcing, our supply chain, we didn't have that much under control as we thought. So I think since then we've been learning. I mean, we've been learning as companies first to understand better our supply chain, and not only the last two steps of the chain, that is normally what you have a good control on, but really going all the way up and trying to understand who is behind the source of the products that you say. Because as Randy say, one component out of many, I mean, can completely stop the production of a critical line, right? So I think as we were learning all that, obviously the rest of the food chain, right? So healthcare providers, hospitals, and customers, and ultimately patients, they were suffering as well. I think as an industry, I think we did a reasonably good job in order to protect the patients, and even with some areas of limited supply, we managed to prioritize those key products that will ensure that at least the basic healthcare would be provided. But obviously not without tension. And I think that hospitals learn about that as well. And that's a lesson that right now are having a very significant and, in my view, positive implications in the way our relation is established right now with healthcare providers. They expect much more than a good product and a good price. I mean, they expect us to have availability. They want to know much more about our supply chain. And they want the data, they want the information. And you start to see that in RFPs and in tenders. I mean, that logistical information is critical part of that. So I think that we are in an era where we're going to have to be much more transparent with our customers to give them the peace of mind that actually our supply chains are solid with the right information for them to be able, again, to plan their procedures and their work in the right way. So that's what I'm seeing.
Great. Vlad, anything to add?
Yes, first of all, I echo what my colleagues said. I think one thing I would say is that over the past 4 years, all of us spend more time on supply chain than we ever could imagine. And I think any general manager in Medtech industry has as well. Number two is, as for Ethicon specifically, as we're the leader in the surgical space, and pretty much every operating room around the world uses some products that Ethicon produces, it put this significant responsibility in our case, not just to maintain the business continuity, but also maintain public health continuity and avoid any crises around the world. And so there were short-term actions we took, and then kind of some things that we think in long-term. But from the short-term point of view, it was really about ramping up manufacturing, about building up inventory. And Randy, you said we all designed our supply chain to be global, to be lean. But with that comes lack of agility. And so we try to, in a very rapid way, build that agility, which means build inventory, bring products closer to the customer. So that was one dimension. The second dimension, which again was a big challenge during and post-pandemic, is how procedures developed. It was very difficult. You know, surgery is relatively predictable space, right? It grows by 3-4% every year. You know where the surgical procedures are done. But during the pandemic, there was a wave up and down. And so it was very difficult to predict which product for which specialties in which geographies are needed. So that kind of forced us in a positive way to do a much better job in terms of demand planning, but also do a much better job, what I said, in terms of having products closer to the customer. And then longer term, obviously, those are big investments, what you talked about. How do we actually invest in sustainable supplier base, sustainable network of manufacturing? How do we use technology and digital technology to be much more effective and efficient? And we can talk more about that, I'm sure, that moving forward.
Absolutely. And Tammy, you're the only person on the stage with a title that includes supply chain resilience and shortage prevention. Any kind of reactions, thoughts?
Oh, I have a lot. Yes, absolutely. So first of all, let me say ditto to everything that's been said and the transformations that we've seen during the public health emergency and what sparked some of those transformative ideas and how we're thinking about supply chain now. I also encourage, one thing I didn't hear on the stage was as the businesses have evolved and started to transform the way they're thinking about supply chains and understanding those nth tier suppliers and qualifying alternative suppliers for multiple components to have that resiliency. The one thing that I also would say is I think what evolved during the public health emergency too is our relationship between the government and with the industry. So I want to bring that to the forefront here because I think what we did learn and what we continue to learn, even though to your point we're out of the public health emergency now, we're starting to still see multi-manufacturer, multi-device impacts from the geopolitical issues or whether it's regulatory pressures that we're seeing. And so the value of that partnership that was so clearly evident during the public health emergency, I encourage us to continue to have those discussions and find ways that we can continue to work together. From an FDA perspective, we were all out during the emergency. I think we had some great wins. We had some great evidence of how when we work together early to understand what the issues are, we can solve those issues. And so just bringing that to the table as we move forward, I think it's going to be absolutely important that we continue to work together and have that partnership so we can address those challenges that we know are coming, pre-position those mitigations. So hopefully we're evolving and transforming that partnership together, and we're helping you all in what you're thinking about your suppliers and how you pre-position inventory and demand and understanding what the demand is. We understand you from your company perspective definitely have that capability, but when we start looking at critical devices and the role that we play and helping ensure that patients have access to those, again, that partnership is going to continue to be critical moving forward.
So I'm just curious in the audience how many of the folks here are from smaller startup organizations versus larger companies? I think one of the interesting things, just hearing from Nacho and Vlad, is one of the sort of unintended consequences, I think, of all the supply chain disruption is that as a startup, as a new vendor for a hospital, there is definitely a higher bar. Hospital administrators are looking at bringing in new suppliers, trying to understand, are we going to be able to supply this equipment? How stable are we? And that just as a startup, it's something to be more mindful of and make sure that you're working with your hospital partners to give them a level of confidence that you are going to be, a good supplier to them.
And I just want to add in there as far as from the hospital perspective and reaching back, we don't need to also fall back into old habits, right? So when we're talking about sole source contracts, being aware that, like you said, your healthcare providers and your healthcare systems are demanding that additional comfort level of your suppliers and your ability to provide, but at the same time realizing that we have strength when we have multiple contract sourcing, et cetera. So I just want to reiterate that as well.
Great. Shall we see what the audience said about their top 3 supply chain challenges? Third-party supplier distributor disruptions, cost pressure, tighter margins, increased geopolitical uncertainty are the top 3 I think we touched on. Many of those as we were kind of discussing it. On that sort of top one, third-party supplier distributor disruptions, I would be curious, just given that that's rising to the top, we've had, from a BCG perspective, working with some of our clients, a lot of discussions upstream thinking about supplier base, thinking about increased transparency and visibility, some of the things that you guys were just talking about. We've seen 2 different things. We've seen consolidation of a supply base to try and make it easier to manage. We've also seen risk mitigation tactics that says we're going to do more dual sourcing or even beyond in some cases. How are you guys sort of feeling about sort of those dynamics right now? Because I think the dynamics of more regionalization, trying to consolidate supply base, but also trying to manage and balance that out, and maybe, I know it'll be different, Manisha, for someone like in your position versus maybe, Vlad or Nacho in that case.
I might take the first shot. I think that, as I say before, we learn a lot. And I remember really a sleepless night, 2 or 3 years back, trying to figure out how are you going to manage your production in the next 3 months, when normally you have it well planned for the next 18 or 24. And it was tough. And it was tough discussions with suppliers because they couldn't do much, and we knew that. So I think that the strategies to manage suppliers in general have changed, and we need to be mindful that for critical components, we cannot manage with one source only. I think we need to have dual source, triple source, and we need to have plans in place to help us, because nobody knows. I think it's interesting, in the video at the beginning, you show one slide where the supply chain discussion was top of mind for all executives. It's fading out. I mean, it was right after COVID, everybody was talking about supply chain and things that had to change. Well, now I think that we're getting back to normal, and I think people might be forgetting a little bit of that. At some point it will come back. I don't know in what way or shape, but it will be back. And I think we have to be better ready to have less sleepless nights than what we had in that time.
Yeah, and I'll jump in there a little bit as well, just to play off Nacho. Multi-sourcing is critical. I mean, it has to be here for now and forever. You can't get strong enough with the multi-sourcing of your components. But then also when we were talking about, or when I was talking about regionalization, it's not just about putting a line up in a part of the world. If you don't have the supply base regionally that can support that, then you're going to have longer downstream concerns, issues, or risks that need to be mitigated. So that's where, again, those third-party suppliers, how you're going to source that supply base has to be critical and point of mind to your regionalization strategy. Has to.
I think from our perspective, we don't have the size and scale to have multiple suppliers and dual suppliers. So we sort of use our lack of scale to our advantage and really think about partnering, developing a really strong relationship with our suppliers, understanding that our quantities are a fraction of what some of their other customers require, and they can typically squeeze us in or get our product to us because of that sort of smaller amount that we need. And so we've tried to leverage relationships and really work through kind of in between the other orders that they have to ensure that we can get a steady supply of what we need.
Yeah, we definitely, to support what you said, we definitely move toward multi-supplier strategy to de-risk it. That's number one. Number two, as I said, we use technology now to try to predict where the risks could come from. And then I would say number three, we are starting to look at suppliers in a different way and looking at the key suppliers more as partners, where we actually, build innovation together, where we're planning for the future together in a very different manner. And I think this transition to being a transactional supplier to being a true partner is a key success factor moving forward.
Helpful perspectives across the board. Tammy, maybe just to bring it back to you for a minute, as we talked about some of these ecosystems and balancing the supply base, thinking about suppliers in different ways, as sort of a government voice on the stage, and we know that some of the dynamics have been a little bit challenged, I think, from a geopolitical standpoint, I think more globally. How are you guys seeing that view, as a regulator, as a, maybe a government agent, if you will, on that front?
Yeah, so coming back to the previous conversation, obviously, like you said, I think during the public health emergency and even post, we've seen that the manufacturers that have those strong relationships with the suppliers really had much more success, and they continue to develop those. So just last comment on that. From moving forward and talking about geopolitical issues and regulatory pressures, I think one thing we saw during the public health emergency too is, and I'll just bring it up because we know the supply chains are interconnected. Often parts, components, raw materials, et cetera, needed in the medical device industry are also needed in automobile, phone, et cetera. So, you're talking about semiconductors, you're talking about packaging materials, just a variety of resins. We even saw when the winter storm came through, right? I mean, there was a lot of competition for different types of products when those resins were going to get produced and how they were going to be run through the stacks, right? So understanding Medtech and being able to advocate for those critical devices and the sector needing and getting access to those raw materials and components, we've seen has been a challenge. And so I think moving forward, we have to think about how we continue to inform, how Medtech continues to have access to those in situations where there are going to be constraints and allocations, and maybe not the largest sector at the table for that. So we're seeing some of those issues now when you start thinking about even PFAS for the future. What does that look like for the medtech industry with regards to suppliers getting out of producing that? And then what happens, obviously, some of the automobile industry or others can adapt maybe quicker to that. So I think working together with us as, you know, the federal partner too, and helping us understand that impact, and then we can obviously continue to work together with you to understand what those policies or perspectives can be, and help inform decisions around that, and hopefully help mitigate some of that before we move forward. So even if it's just from we understand this is going to be an issue down the road, how do we work together? Are there regulatory innovations or flexibilities that we can bring to the table as well to help the industry transition if that's what needs to happen? And how do we address some of the ongoing challenges from that geopolitical or regulatory pressures that we're seeing?
And I would say yes to emphasize the importance of what just Tammy said, right? So I think in the middle of the critical time of sourcing of the semiconductors, and Tyvek later on, but on the semiconductors, I think I think the industry, together with AdvaMed, we did a phenomenal job really trying to explain the importance of what we do. But the reality is that you might wait 1 year to change your car, but not your pacemaker, right? So, and that reality in the world of semiconductors, where we represent a very, very small fraction of that market, really we had very little leverage to the industry, semiconductor industry. All that discussions, I think, that needs to happen now that we have a little bit better landscape to be prepared for the next one, because things like prioritization and more dialogue. And it's very difficult to have that discussion in the middle of the crisis because everybody is yelling and everybody's shouting, everybody's screaming. Now is the time to have these discussions, partnering with the government and with other industries in order to prevent the next crisis that I'm sure will come sooner or later.
So that's a great segue, actually. We're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about products for a minute. I know you've all brought some good product ideas to talk about where you might have deployed some of these more resilient approaches to managing your supply chain. So maybe we can turn to what we're affectionately calling our show and tell. And maybe we can flip ahead to a slide there for the group, and we can start with you, Randy, on your product of choice and how you guys evolved around that one.
Yeah, sure. No, happy to jump in. I guess you're going to hear from some of my other colleagues on capital equipment and or devices. So I wanted to bring something to our show and tell from a drug delivery standpoint. And as you can probably barely see in my hand, I'm holding a syringe. So hopefully you can look up at one of the monitors for a better view. And you're like, well, yeah, okay, what's the big deal? Why is the syringe so unique? Why are you bringing it to show and tell today, Randy? Well, it's not just your average syringe, it's a pre-filled syringe. And it's not just a pre-filled syringe, it's a smart syringe. So it's connected. You can see on the screen there the semiconductor chip, Bluetooth compatibility to be connected. So we want to be connected to the data so we can get insights from that, whether it be dosing information, dosing timing. So this is where a simple device does become complex, because this could be used, if you think about it, in all sites of care, from a hospital to a clinic to an office to a surgery center, even down to the home environment. So you're going to have to take something simple, connected, complex. It's complex into the hundreds of millions, if not billions, that need to be manufactured. So this is where things come into play, such as a high need for industrialization, a high need for automation. You cannot make hundreds of millions of billions of devices if you are not highly automated. Additionally, things that we spoke about kind of pull into it as well, such as regionalization, such as multi-sourcing. Again, you can't be down on any of these components in development and manufacturing, let alone on the back end. We took with our partner a very sustainable approach. So this could be, I think it's, a high 90% broken down and recycled on the back end as well. I'll pass show and tell.
Yeah, please. Yeah, down the line. Manish, over to you.
Am I next? All right, well, it was very easy for me to decide what to bring for show and tell because we have one product. This is ActiveSight. It consists of an imaging module, which I'm holding in my hand. I know it's difficult to see, so you can kind of see it on the monitor there. And then there's what we call a light engine. And what ActiveSight is it's an advanced visualization device. It allows surgeons to see real-time blood perfusion without the use of a dye with the click of a button. And it integrates seamlessly with existing hardware that's in the operating room today. So this imaging module sits between a standard IR scope and a surgical camera, and then our light engine sits on the video tower. What's interesting about these products, if you look at the two together, there are about 200 plus components on the BOM. And they're pretty complex. There's custom optics, circuit boards, lasers, machined parts, power supplies, GPUs, and all of that needs to be managed through the supply chain. As I mentioned, we're in a limited market release right now. So in the last few years, we needed to build a small quantity of these devices for our initial launch. And we were running into challenges getting access to GPUs. You probably saw in the news all the stories about Ford trucks that were sitting in lots waiting for GPUs to get delivered. Well, we needed a very small quantity, and obviously as a startup did not have the scale and power of Ford to demand those types of GPUs. But what we did have is we have NVIDIA on our cap table. They're a very strong development partner of ours. And so we actually leverage the power of NVIDIA to go into their partner network and actually source GPUs directly for us and get us access to those components in 1/10 of the time that it would have taken us to get them if we had tried to get it directly. So that was one way that we were sort of creatively trying to get around some of the shortages for critical components during that period of time. The other thing that the team has done is really be forward-thinking in the design of the product. And so we have actually over-specced some of the components like the GPUs. They're more powerful than what we would need for the functionality of the device today. But what that will allow us to do is build new software, getting into AI, and be able to deliver those enhanced features without having to go back into the hardware, update the design, and get new components. So I think that forward-thinking approach with design is another way that we've been trying to manage the supply chain issues.
Nacho?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to present this beauty. This is part of our recently launched new endoscopy platform, AB61. It's really right off the oven, and don't worry, Bob, it says not for clinical use, so we cannot do anything here today, but I'm sure you will have an opportunity at some point.
I'm quite familiar.
Well, the story about this device is that it was, every about 6 to 8 years we launch a new platform, and every time that we do, it's really a revolution in the endoscopy world. We bring innovation and we help ultimately doctors to do a better job in the endoscopy room. And this one obviously will have a lot of that with new imaging modalities that help detect more polyps, see more vessels, help with hemostasis, better ergonomics. So we were crazy about launching this product in the market, and we were developing it in the middle of the COVID, right? So I think this was the hard work, and we were working with our suppliers to make sure that we could do it, and the launches of these products normally are of a high demand. So we knew that we were going to need a lot of them right from the beginning. There is only in this beauty, there is about 1,400 components. But this is connected to electronic imaging tower and light source, etc. So the whole system is probably more than 3,000 components altogether. You miss one, and you miss the entire system, right? So it's definitely stressful. And as I say, right, so 3 years back when we were started to plan the production of the devices, it was really a challenge because we couldn't have any real visibility on the supply chain, what was going to happen. Situation has improved a little bit now, but definitely it's something that needs to continue being top of mind, right? Because I think we all have developed a better plans to work with our suppliers and or have multiple sources and better analytics, better data to work with that. But I think that this is something that is not going to go away. And I mean, you were mentioning about other kind of disruptions that might happen in the market. You see the world is a little bit of a crazy place right now, so who knows what happened tomorrow. And what we know is that our patients need these products, right? So I think that we also have a responsibility as an industry to make sure that together with the government and together with other stakeholders that the products can reach the market. So I think it's a perfect example about the complexity of the supply chain.
Vlad?
Well, first of all, what a great idea to talk about supply chain challenges through the lens of actual products. It's brilliant, whoever came up with that. So I chose a very basic product, but I thought it was a really good example to talk about supply chain. And so Johnson & Johnson started over 130 years ago with a sterile surgical suture. And today those sutures are used in most of the operating rooms around the world. In fact, we manufacture enough sutures in 1 year that if you put it in one strand, we could wrap the earth 12 times. And that just kind of puts a lot of pressure on our supply chain, but also what I talked about, accountability and responsibility to the patients. So this specific suture is called Stratafix, and what you see, it's a little bit like a Christmas tree. It's barbed suture, and it solves two unmet needs. One is surgeons don't need to tie a knot when they use the suture, and so you can do surgical procedures faster and get to more distal parts of the body. And what that helps to do is bring more patients through the system. Number two, surgical site infection is a massive problem around the world. In the US, close to 800,000 patients actually experience surgical site infection. And outside of just patient issues, there's a massive cost to healthcare. So this product is covered with the triclosan, which is antimicrobial substance, and it prevents from surgical site infections. So all in all, it's an important product both from the volume of patient it treats, but also from the clinical relevance that it brings. So what did we do? And it's a relatively new product. It's just a few years on the market. So what we've done from the supply chain point of view, number one, we moved from what historically is relatively labor-intensive manufacturing to fully automated manufacturing. So that's number one. Number two, we talked about the digital control towers before, so we created what we think state-of-the-art connectivity with all of our suppliers where we could predict risks from raw material where they could happen. Number three, this is a fast-growing product, and again, it's a procedure that this type of product is very quickly adapted around the world, and so very sophisticated demand planning and understanding where the product is needed around the world was number three. And number four, and Tammy, you talked a little bit about it, is the transparency that we have with healthcare providers to make sure that they know what we can supply. We understand the needs of our customers as well. So those were the four big buckets that we've kind of either totally innovated or had to up our game significantly to make sure that this is a state-of-the-art supply chain for this product.
Tam, anything to add from your side? I know you didn't bring a product today, but you've seen a lot of products coming through.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I would just echo what everyone said today about the complexity of the devices that were presented during the show and tell, and I would also just echo the importance for the patients ensuring the clinical access. And then what I will say is this kind of brings it all to life, and we know without one piece, part, or component, we're not going to be able to manufacture. Patients are going to be impacted, but what I will also say is what we've seen and what we continue to see is most times it's our vulnerable populations. So I just wanted to bring that up too as something we hadn't talked about on the stage today, but when we see patients impacted, we do know that most oftentimes it's the really vulnerable populations that can't get access to the healthcare and the devices they need. And so this kind of brought that to life for me, so I did want to just mention that as well.
Thank you. Manisha, I'm going to turn it over to you on maybe, again, just changing course here a little bit. And we've talked a lot about the tech in Medtech and even just the simple products and more complicated products we talked about today. Since Y2K, hence the reference in my earlier intro, there's been a massive deployment of technology in healthcare and globally in the world just in general. we're seeing an acceleration of things like AI, advanced analytics, and Gen AI. In fact, referencing back to the video, as the supply chain topic has drifted from number 1 to number 3 and 4, the AI topic has drifted from 5 to 4 to 3 to the last couple of quarters up to number 1 or number 2, depending on which quarter we're talking about. So as you think about advanced technologies, AI, Gen AI, et cetera, how are you thinking about incorporating that on a go-forward basis? And where are you in that maturity? I know you're commercializing, you're about to launch, but like clearly I think of you as an Excel company, young, nimble, ready to go. How are you guys thinking about that?
Yeah, thank you, Bob. This is a great topic. I love talking about AI because over the last year, I think it's probably one of the biggest buzzwords. Everyone is feeling the impact of AI in their own sort of consumer life and the rise of ChatGPT. And as Active Surgical, we've been looking at AI for the last 6 years. And it's kind of funny when my nieces are calling me, telling me all about AI. And I say, well, you know, I do work at an AI company, but they don't realize. And so ActiveSite, which I shared with you, it's more than just a device. It's actually a platform for AI. And the entire platform was built with the idea of bringing AI into the operating room in real time. We actually did our first AI case in December of 22 with Ohio State University in one of their IRBs. We actually collect all of the data off of our own device. We have a team that can build all the modeling, do all the AI algorithms, and then because of the way the product is designed, I mentioned sort of that future facing with the GPUs, we have the ability to deploy the AI directly onto our existing device that's already in the OR. And so we did our first AI-enabled case in December. It was a tissue segmentation model, and what we found was we got great feedback from the surgeons. They found that the AI actually helped to make it easier for them to digest the information that they were getting. It lowered their cognitive burden during the procedure. And so that was sort of validating for us that the value that the AI can bring. And I think with AI being sort of out in mainstream, it's really just increased the interest from hospitals and surgeons on the value that AI can bring into the OR. And so we've had the opportunity to work with a ton of thought-leading surgeons right now on AI applications. And I think the real key right now is thinking about what value is this going to bring into the operating room, into the hospital, into clinical care. Technology is great for technology's sake, but you need to bring value if you're going to have a real business, if you're going to drive adoption. It's either impacting clinical outcomes, it's reducing costs, streamlining workflow. What value are you really bringing? I think that's the thing that we all need to spend time thinking about before we sort of jump in both feet thinking about some of this innovation.
Yeah, the use cases for sure, how it's going to deploy use cases. Before I open it up to the rest of the panel to respond to that, I'd also like to poll the audience again. If we can pull it up, you'll see the same Slido format if you click on your phones and take a picture of that QR code. Basically looking to understand what top 3 areas you might be currently or considering deploying advanced technologies, either in your supply chain or beyond. While we wait for those responses, maybe turn it back to the panel here. I don't know if other folks want to respond to how you guys are thinking about advanced technologies in your supply chains, how you're thinking about deploying.
I think there is obviously a lot of digital around us, not only in our companies, but in our lives. And it's an unavoidable thing that is happening. I think what Manisha say, and I fully agree with that, is that we are medical technology companies. And we have to make sure that all that fancy words really translate into a benefit for the community that we serve, right? So I think go back to the quadruple aim of making things cheaper with better clinical outcome, with more satisfaction from patients and more satisfaction from healthcare providers. Well, this is what we need to connect all the digital possibilities, which are plenty, into the reality of the products. I think, at least in our case, it's not our intention to be the next Google. There is a great Google to do that. Our intention is to be the best medical technology in the world, utilizing digital technologies. But I think it's an area where still many things needs to be proven about how all the technologies are really provide the value. In some areas, it's happening already, but in many others will keep coming. As per the supply chain, I think that the obvious one for us, I think, is predictive analytics and trying to, the biggest, obviously, the answer for any supply chain manager is, how much of this I'm going to need next year, right? So, And there is a lot that can be done right now with tools that in the past was much more difficult to do in a very intelligent way.
Yeah, and I can jump in from a manufacturing perspective. It's amazing the level of automation that you can achieve just in the shop floor, let alone the interconnectivity of everything on that line, right? So the main thing is what can you do to identify defects or quality issues as soon as possible in real time? That's where you really need to have that advanced analytics and really the machine learning aspects of it. Another kind of buzzwords that's out there. I was walking down the hall yesterday, and somebody was like, "Hey, you're with Flex. What's this digital twin thing? Is this real or is it a marketing thing?" And I'm like, "No, it is. Hey, it is 100% real, and it could allow you to scale in just rapid time. What you could do in 3 months, you can now do in 3 weeks with a line transfer." So we used it, extensively. I joined post-COVID, but Flex really excelled and used this technology during COVID. They ramped ventilator production in a site that had never produced medical equipment ever in 16 weeks, had an actual physical product for one of our partners, and they did this through digital twins, running various what-if scenarios through this model with many, many variables over and over and over and over, just to allow the scalability to really react in a more agile fashion very, very quickly. So there's a number of different ways that you can go with all the technology that's available today.
Vlad, I know J&J has pushed pretty hard on their supply chain and some pretty innovative models. Any thoughts or reactions?
No, I think I was looking I was listening to your answers, and I was looking at the sign above your head which says Medtech, and I think if we were here maybe 20 years ago, this would say medical devices. And I mean, there's just tremendous shift to Medtech, and I think that tech has so many dimensions. One is, and you very eloquently talked about it, one is clearly patient care dimension, but we're talking about supply chain and this manufacturing dimension. For me, this is going to be a critical enabler to build a resilient supply chain. So we're putting a lot of effort into digitizing, all aspects of our value creation, from R&D to supply chain to commercial, and AI is going to be, and already is, a massive component of that.
Why don't we see what the audience said in terms of their top 3 priorities? See what popped up here. So, Nacho, I think you touched on the demand planning and forecasting. I think that's what's coming through loud and clear here. The automation point around the supply chain processes, Randy, that you talked about, neck and neck with master data management and risk management. So I think, a lot of those topics around just managing upstream in the supply chain, understanding sort of the movements, and trying to drive those internal use cases of squeezing out, more visibility into the supply chain processes.
So I'll add a couple of things FDA is working on too, is looking at predictive modeling for supply chain vulnerabilities and risk assessment. So understanding, with the data that we have available as well, external and internal data sources, how we can use that to make informed decisions, but also work with the industry to look at what those vulnerabilities might be and address them early on. One of the things, too, that we're looking at is how we can use AI as for demand modeling, and we've started actually development of some demand modeling capabilities as well, because one of the things we've heard is what was the true demand, what is our true demand, and so we're really working on that as well. So I just wanted to bring that to the front. We are also, let me just mention as well, realize, we do have a lot of data in the pre-market submissions, and so we're looking at how we mine that data, and then we're using machine learning as well to help pull out some of that information to help us, because we realize we don't want to be overly burdensome, but it's helpful if we can work together to understand what those vulnerabilities are, and so looking at some of that information as well, and really integrating that data or pulling it out of those documents to help us have a better picture of that. So a lot of there.
Thanks, Tammy. And I will say, BCG was involved a couple of years ago doing a pretty extensive look along with a partner organization on regulatory bodies around the world and how they're leaning into these new advanced technologies coming to market. And the FDA scored very, very well in terms of its ability to engage in a way that our medtech peers are looking to engage in, especially with products, software as a medical device, et cetera. So you guys have been pushing really hard, and I think we all appreciate it as an industry and as patients. So thank you for that.
And Bob,
yeah.
I would like to add something that, because I think that as we're talking about all these digital tools in the supply chain or in product development, I think that there is also an opportunity to work together with the agency and others in order to prevent what is coming, right? Because all these digital abilities, whatever you call it, are also bringing a lot of vulnerabilities to the system and a lot of challenges that we didn't have before. I think the benefits will overweight the negatives, but we need to work on that, and we need to make sure together that those products are safe, that those products are not vulnerable, and we can. And this is the job that needs to be done right now, right? So because otherwise we're going to get into a world where it will be very difficult to manage for all of us.
Looking out to the audience, I don't know if folks have any questions for the panel. Happy to spend 10 minutes here, give folks a chance to ask questions. There's 2 mics in the floor there if folks want to step up.
Yeah,
Please.
a topic that hasn't come up today that is, I think, an important one to talk about is sterilization and how that is potentially an Achilles heel or a risk, if you will, for supply chain. I'd like to maybe get the panel's thoughts about that issue.
Anyone want to start?
We can all jump in. Yeah, we can all.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's on the forefront, and I know a lot of these panel members have been very involved with AdvaMed's efforts on those as well. And right now there is not, the single solution that we're looking for, because we're highly reliant on a couple partners out there. And if those facilities are even shut down for a day, it drastically impacts the throughput of the medical devices that are going to be going out to patients. So we have great supplier relationships. A lot of manufacturers are bringing some of that in-house, but it's not applicable, right? So what I'm talking about with some of what we do, we can bring in e-beam sterilization to our manufacturing facility, not ETO sterilization. So it's different. So you can solve the puzzle in different ways if you have the capital to invest, but right now you're very reliant on some of the main players from a supplier perspective that everyone's trying to help.
Well, thank you for the question, first of all. I think that this is one of the hottest questions in the industry right now. And I think in my view, I mean, as a matter of fact, medical devices needs to be sterilized before they are used, right? So this is unavoidable. And yes, we need to look continuously for technologies that allow for that to happen in a less invasive possible way. But in the meantime, we still need to sterilize devices, right? So I think the answer to that challenge, which is obviously a big topic and a big discussion for all of us, for me, it really is in science, right? So I think there is a lot of highlights, there is a lot of things that you can read in the news, but I think we really need to get to the science, to the details, to the reality of what is being told, and all together look for a solution, because there is not a silver bullet that will make those products to be sterilized immediately. We still need to work with them. And I think it's one of those topics that sometimes the public media is presenting it in a way which is not completely real, and I think is not scientifically based. We need to go back to the science, we need to understand where the data points are, and then work together in order to find solutions for that.
Yeah, just to build on what you said, first of all, it is a great question, and it is an elephant on the table. And look, I think it also is an example on how AdvaMed comes together, AdvaMed members come together and working on a critical topic. And this is definitely one other topic where AdvaMed is all the companies are working together. For me, it's kind of 3 things there. One is partnering with the government, partnering with the FDA, and partnering across the industry to shape the policy. So that's number 1. Number 2 is how do we improve practices that are happening today and how do we make them better? And then number 3 is looking at alternative modalities moving forward on what will be the technologies in the future.
And I'll just say, FDA has been involved in sterilization issues for many years, but obviously we have our innovation challenges. We've been working with industry on alternative modalities. This is also an area where we've been working with industry recently very closely as well to understand some of the challenges and the pressures that are coming, to work with AvaMed closely to understand some of the potential supply chain impacts and making sure that we are working interagency to inform where possible. So we're very active in this, while at the same time being committed to obviously reducing the use of ETO where possible, and have many, they'll have the master files open as well as the innovation challenges. So FDA has been very active in this and will continue to partner with industry. It's been a great relationship with AvaMed as well, and just know that we are evaluating supply chain and the risk associated with that, and very active in the interagency and active with the industry. So.
Great, thank you. Great question. Any others?
Hi there. Justin McCabe with the Medicred program. Thank you all for an excellent discussion today. Yeah, I really appreciated the show and tell. Love that idea. Really hits it home. A number of you mentioned the importance of collaboration with government and industry, and really being prepared for the next disruption whenever that takes place. And you know, my organization is actually chairing a working group that's bringing together industry, government, FDA, Department of Commerce, large OEMs, as well as contract manufacturers and suppliers down the tiers in the supply chain, really trying to identify where those weaknesses are in the supply chain and be ready for the next disruption. I guess my question for you is, what do you see that's working now that's really enhancing the collaboration and getting industry ready for that next disruption? Where your organization participating and what are you seeing as best practice out there?
Great, thank you for the question. Tammy, do you want to start with that one, given your, as I said, the title of shortage prevention and working to really unlock some of those sticking points?
Sure. So, I mean, I think there were a ton of lessons learned during the public health emergency, and the biggest one was working together, we can solve issues, and even the most complex, craziest issues that you might get a phone call on a Friday to help solve. So I think it's how we should learn from those lessons, which we have done. We should continue to strengthen those partnerships. Too often we see those go away after a public health emergency, so I think continuing to strengthen those and formalize those. Obviously from an FDA perspective, as we say all along, if the earlier we know, to your point, now let's look at what might be coming, now's the time to do that. The earlier we know, and quite frankly, understand the scope, the better we can help mitigate, put policies in place to help solve issues. So, what can we do with ETO? What can we do with PFAS? What can we do with some of these issues or challenges, geopolitical issues that we're seeing, broader sterilization landscape, to be quite frank with you, it's not just ETO. So I think the lessons learned, working together, how we're going to do that in the future, I mean, obviously, FDA is interested in partnering with the industry as we move forward and formalizing some opportunities to address some of the more complex challenges, and we're looking to do that in the very near future. And so we are having conversations around that, and we work with our partners, like I said, on a day-to-day basis. We have consistent outreach, we have lots of communications, and I just want to make the point too, for those in the audience, really during the public health emergency and even today, if there's a decision made in the USG about prioritization, about moving a boat into port sooner, about whatever that question is going to be about Medtech compared to the automobile and how to advocate for that, they come to FDA. They come to us and they say, what criticality, patient impact. We're the ones, we're kind of that center, that go-to, that everything coming into the government, they rely on us to do that. So whether it's Commerce or whether it's ASPR or DPA, we are those people that they come to get that impact assessment. And that's what our program does and what we'll continue to do moving forward. But what I'll say is that that's really the crux of how we build resiliency together, as we work together. We understand the issues early on, and we have a very active partnership where we can share transparently, but still protect information as well. So that's what we're kind of visioning for the future, and we hope that everyone in the room is on the same page about where we are as far as resilience and the benefits of all of us being at the table, which we saw during the public health emergency and that we continue to see today. That was a lot.
Well, I just to add on that, Tammy, I fully subscribe all what you say, but I also think that we operate better under crisis than out of crisis, right? So I think that probably the poster child, for example, in the beginning of the crisis of the COVID was the ventilator, right? So I think what the industry working with the government and what the suppliers and all the stakeholders were able to do to provide ventilators to the population, that was a critical item, was amazing to see. And I think that from our point of view, I think the industry and everyone else will rally together in order to bring that solution with extreme urgency. Well, now we don't have the urgency, but the issues are still there, and I think that the issues are sooner or later are going to surface. Hopefully not with the impact that happened at the COVID, but now is the time to really do a lot of strategic planning together, industry, government, suppliers, everybody, in order to anticipate all those problems that certainly are going to come.
Manish, you looked like you had something to say.
Yeah, I was just going to add, in addition to these type of national organizations like AvaMed working in the federal government, we've been very active with Medtech because we're a Boston-based company. I'm on the board of Medtech, and so we've tried to work with other medtech companies based in Massachusetts with our state government as another way to sort of network and work together as an industry, sort of more locally as well.
Great question. Any other questions?
Okay, no one can throw their coffee cups at me. I am with DuPont Tyvek, so I heard you talk about this a little bit up here. I love the conversation today. I love that you are working towards better relationships with your supply chain. What I would highly encourage you to do as you explore into your AI use of forecasting is to put the caveat in there, what if everyone else is doing the same thing at the same time? Because I'm pretty sure that's what's happened in the last few years. The last couple of years have been no treat for us, just as much as it's been no treat for you. When we would ask customers calling us about the supply situation, about how much Tyvek they were using this year over last year, we got a lot of blank stares. No one knew. So I'd add that into your systems as well, of being able to extract that type of data out to help your suppliers understand where this demand is coming from. Because most of the customers we spoke with said we're not seeing growth more than 5 to 7%, but that did not explain a close to 30% increase of demand from one year to the next. So for us to be able to help you in the way that we know that we can, I implore you to put these caveats into your future planning as well as talk with us. Because already companies, big and small, are not sharing with us what that demand forecast is looking like. And we don't have direct visibility to you because of our distribution system. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for your comment, and more importantly, thank you for the partnership. And I think we all rely on partners like you, so thank you.
I think the theme I was taken away from that was we should be definitely deploying advanced tools for demand forecasting and planning, which we heard. And 2, communication. Communicate with partners across the ecosystem, because it's complicated, it's global, it's messy, and waiting for the burning platform to really instigate a conversation is a difficult way to start a relationship. And so having those relationships in place already gives people, I think, the benefit of the doubt out of the gate and working that way.
And I think it's, I think the words have been mentioned, right? But it's the time of partnership, transparency, and trust. Because we can only do this working together across the supply chain, and we need to trust each other. I mean, that it was a time that those kind of information was considered kind of a competitive advantage. I think now we have to share. If we cannot share this information in transparency with our partners and with our customers, I mean, this is not going to improve.
And not to sort of belabor the point too much, but I will say that working with a cross-section of medtech companies, I would say that I have yet to meet a best-in-class demand planner and forecaster in the industry. I think it's an area that we could all do a little bit better in. And so we appreciate it. And sometimes I don't think it's that we don't want to have the conversation. It's that we don't have perfect information to have the conversation sometimes, which makes it a challenge. Do you have one last question? I think we've got time for one last question.
Thank you. My name is Vishnu, and I represent the government of Tamil Nadu, the second largest economy in India. And we are the investment promotion arm of the state government. So my question is that, given the current geopolitical situations, and we see a lot of influx of investments from consumer electronic industries and such. So I just wanted to understand your perspective on the medtech industry and how India is looked at on building a robust supply chain in terms of manufacturing and others.
Anyone want to venture down in that path?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you. So, Vishnu, thank you for the question. And I spent 6 years in Asia and love your culture and your country. And look, it all starts with unmet need. And there's a huge population in India and a lot of medical and clinical unmet need. And to me, that is first. Patients are waiting, and we as an industry, and specifically, the company I represent, Johnson & Johnson, needs to be there in the best possible way. And so, while you talked about the supply chain investment, we have a number of manufacturing facilities in India, and it goes back to where we started. How do you de-risk the global supply chain so you can bring products closer to the customer? So that investment, from our point of view, will continue. And then I think the next step is also for us to look how can we increase not just manufacturing side of things, but also looking at science in a much broader way that is coming out of India. So there's a full commitment from our side, and I think majority of the medtech industry is in a similar situation.
Yeah, and I can jump in as well. So I think it really depends. It's company dependent. So Vlad has a perspective. Flex has manufacturing facilities that in some of the other sectors, not from a health solutions perspective, but it's something that we're actively trying to source. But it's what is your endpoint? Are you trying to be India for India? Are you trying to be India for Asia? Are you trying to be India for globalization as far as like your manufacturing footprint and where you're going to distribute those products? There's a lot of regulations that's changing as well. So again, we're looking at value-added services to be able to prepare facilities out of China in India because now goods can flow a little bit more freely, but between the two. So it really depends what the strategy is, what you're trying to solve for, and what you're trying to de-risk and or plan for the future with kind of your footprint or your strategy.
I mean, I just would add, and I agree with both comments, that there is no company in the world right now that is doing their strategic plan without India being there, right? So India is very relevant for all of us. Obviously, from the point of view of the internal market, is a massive population there, and also from R&D and manufacturing. I think that the world in general is looking for places where you can conduct business with a foreseeable future, with a reasonable bureaucracy, with stability, all that kind of things, and India is providing that now, and I encourage the government of India to continue providing that, because that's what will continue bringing good investments into the India region.
Great. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Well, we're getting pretty close to the end of time here. We've covered a lot of ground. A couple of themes have continued to come up, right? So clearly, technology, something to think about to improve our supply chain resilience. But that doesn't negate the need, in fact, the desire to have continued ongoing, more transparent communications, building those ecosystems to be successful, to drive forward, and then really getting into advanced looks. Maybe I'll give the whole panel a chance to give one last comment on things that you would want the audience to take away as the couple of things to be thinking about on a go-forward basis in terms of putting supply chain resilience sort of foremost in their thinking. Nacho, I think you said it best. It's really easy to have these things sort of click down the list as other things start to crowd out on a quarterly basis as you guys are talking to investors and talking to your leadership teams. So, what's the one thing that we want the audience to take away? Vlad, I'll start with you and we'll work our way down and give Randy the last word.
Yeah, so I think we talked a lot about supply chain. I'm not sure I'm going to discover anything new for the audience. I just want to go back and say, why are we here? What are we solving? You know, there are 5 billion people around the world that don't have access to quality health care. And many medical interventions end up with complications. In the case of surgery, it's a quarter of all surgical procedures end up with complications. So patients are waiting for us to bring more medical intervention and better medical intervention. And kind of if we look at the broad trends in my mind, how do we solve this? You know, one is patients are getting older. So we get an early diagnosis for many diseases. And so this will bring kind of new ways of treatment. So I think the patient population will change, will age. There will be new proportion of diseases that will evolve. And so we will need to adjust our innovation to that. Number 2 is the site of care change, you know, and that is going to solve the issue of how do we bring better access to healthcare. And so we're going to go more from inpatient to outpatient, from outpatient to home care, and that will require change in innovation, but also change in the way we do supply chain. And then the third one is when you look at the patient profile, and so what does and you look at the sites of care, what does the medical technology will have to do to be successful to solve those unmet needs. And in my mind, it's about making procedures less invasive, smarter, and more personalized. And that is where kind of, I think, the majority of innovation will come from. And supply chain is one of the enablers of that. And so I guess it's a long answer to a short question, but what I want to drive at as the key message is that we build supply chain in order to solve patient unmet need. And I think that's what we have to keep at the forefront.
So I would just echo that as well, keeping patients at front and center. Like I said previously, you know, we've seen during the public health emergency, even post, where it's oftentimes our most vulnerable patients that don't have access when medical devices aren't available. So keeping them at the North Star, and then we are post-public health emergency, and yes, we do work better during an emergency, but we are continuing to see some of the challenges, whether it's the regulatory pressures or geopolitical pressures that are continuing to bubble up and could continue to be more significant as we move forward. So just keeping all of that in mind, and risk management plans, things that we've talked about today, interdependencies, looking at the vulnerabilities, and then I guess the take-home message for me is all about the partnership between the government, the industry, having that front and center, continuing to build on what we already have and enhancing that moving forward so we can continue to do the good things that we have been doing together and enhance those. So that's.
Yeah, not much to add. I think that the world is not becoming easier, and there's more and more challenges ahead of us. And at the same time, I think that we all feel the responsibility in this healthcare industry to keep bringing solutions, and that ultimately we all have a strong purpose in mind to better serve patients across the world. And this is what, no matter what the challenges, we always have to keep in mind. And the key word, of all this discussion and listening from the comments of everybody, I think that Tammy just said it, right? So it's partnership and unity, is working together on all those challenges, because individually we're not going to be able to fix it. And I think the industry, government, suppliers, healthcare providers, we all have to understand that we're going to be much better if we work together on that.
So I love that everyone's sort of closing comments are about the patient, because I think in this industry especially, all of us are driven to serve the patient. And I think the patient is becoming a highly educated, informed consumer of healthcare, and that's something that we've seen over the last decade. They're going to continue to demand the best technology. They're going to be looking for innovation to improve their care. We actually are a tiny little company, as I've mentioned, but we had a patient read a surgical journal about our technology, seek out one of our hospitals to actually have that technology used in their robotic prostatectomy. And that was incredibly powerful as a small company that somebody found us. And so I think it's really critical that we think about continuing to anticipate disruption in supply as our attention focuses on AI and innovation and other things, that we don't sort of lose our focus on this.
No, and I'll build off that because it's all about kind of how I opened up with, is your company evolving or are they transforming, right? Because we did not let a good crisis go to waste. Everyone stepped up, they rose to the challenge. But again, I think it's automation. What can you do to really go deep in automation on your roadmap? You're not only going to benefit from the efficiencies there, but as I said, tying it back to the patients, identify those defects or quality issues at an earlier state, absolutely critical. And then it's really about analytics. I think we hit that hard. I'm still searching for the best world-class demand planner, so if you have it, pass it my way. But again, what technology can do to offset that. Vlad spoke to a control tower. We have a control tower in Paul Center as well, that we have mass amounts of data. We can't get enough data because the more data that you have, that you can put it in the right way and kind of draw from it, it's going to allow you to predict and prevent. Again, predict and prevent. So the more data that you have, that you're running the right reports and analyzing and pulling in multiple streams beyond what's at your fingertips, but even looking at media streams, social feeds, all those to really get into that algorithm is going to help you prevent and predict at a much more accurate level as well. So.
Great. A lot of passion on the stage. I want to thank you all for what you and your organizations are doing in service of patient care, what you've done during some of the crises, but more importantly, what you do every day. Thank you. I want to thank the audience for sticking with us for 75 minutes. Really appreciate it. And I want to thank AdvaMed for a great conference. Everyone have a good day.